past the hour, and as promised, former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Rattner joins us now with charts on the impact of the new spending law on Americans. So, Steve, where do we begin?
Where do we begin? Let's begin over here, Mika, with what's actually in the bill. And I think the conversation between Joe and Heilman before the break was really an important one, which I'll get into in a second. But essentially, I think, as most people know, this would extend the tax cuts in the 2017 Trump tax cut bill. They were going to expire. That was a budget gimmick they did in 2017 to make it look like a smaller deficit was going to occur. So now we're going to add $2 trillion. Increases in the standard deduction, increases in the child tax credit, and then the important priorities of this administration anyway, border and immigration spending, defense spending, and then the goodies that Trump promised during the campaign. No tax on overtime, no tax on deducting your car loan interest, no tax on tips, senior bonus deduction, and then the other side of the coin, $278 billion out of student loan payments that are coming, that will be less. Phasing out the IRA, $540 billion, so important for our climate change efforts. And then the big one, the Medicaid cuts of $841. But as Heilman said before, all the good stuff takes effect now. People are going to get these increases in their standard deduction, in their child tax credit. The Social Security Administration has already sent out a letter to Social Security recipients saying you're going to get a big tax windfall from this bill. They overstated what they're going to get, of course. So they're already out there marketing this. The bad stuff doesn't take effect for the most part until after the 26 midterm elections. So these people, whatever else they are, they're probably not stupid, and they staggered this stuff in a way that could work to their political advantage, or at least less political harm.
But again, for those of us who have been concerned about the deficit and debt for decades, and you and I were talking about this during the Obama administration as well, so it's certainly not just focused on what parties in the White House, unlike, unfortunately, every Republican, just about every Republican in the House and the Senate. This is also a great way to make the deficit explode even more. We're going to give you all the goodies now and all of the cuts, the difficult cuts that we're going to make to try to offset them a little bit, we're going to push down the road. So again, makes a reckless bill even more reckless, right?
Absolutely, and I'll show you those deficit numbers in just a second. But in terms of the actual total impact on the deficit, Joe, to your point, this bill is $3 trillion, assuming they're playing the same game again of having some stuff expire to make it look cheaper. $3 trillion if they leave it as written, so stuff expires. If they make everything permanent, $3.7 trillion. $3 trillion bigger than the House version. The Senate added a bunch of goodies. They then moved some stuff from the temporary to the permanent bucket, so it's a little bit less, but we can call it somewhere in this range of $3 to $4 trillion. But let's put that in perspective. The bipartisan infrastructure law under Biden, $400 billion. The American Rescue Plan, which the Republicans love to trash, and to your point, talk about how it was a deficit buster and so on and so forth, $1.8 trillion, so much less than all this. And then the CARES Act during COVID of 1.7, and even the original Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2017, $1.5 trillion. So this is truly can be described as the mother of all bills, the mother of all deficit-busting bills that we have seen in history, really.
And Steve, you're also looking at income inequality. How will that be impacted?
Yeah, so let's talk about two ways in which many Americans are going to be affected. The first one is Medicaid. We've talked a lot about Medicaid. The Senate version actually increased the amount of Medicaid cuts from $760 billion to $841 billion. The consequences is that something around 11 million people are projected to lose their Medicaid over the coming decade. And so after Obamacare was passed, the Affordable Care Act, we did a really great job of reducing the uninsured population in this country, and this is going to send it halfway back to where we were. I do not know of an example in history where we have instituted a major social benefit like Obamacare, ACA, whatever you want to call it, Medicaid, and then rolled it back so much. This is unprecedented in our history. We've always moved forward, not backwards. Now, if you remember one thing from what I'm saying today, remember what's on this chart, because we've talked a lot about how it helps the rich hurts the poor. Let's just put some numbers around that. If you're in the top 20% of the country, you're going to get an average $6,000 benefit. These green arrows are what you get from tax cuts. The red arrow is what you lose from some of the spending cuts. But these people at the very top are going to get a 2.3% increase in their after-tax income and benefits and what they get from the government, essentially. If you go down here to the bottom 20%, what do you see? These people are actually going to be worse off. They get a very small tax cut, but it is completely, wildly offset. But what they lose from Medicaid cuts, from food stamp cuts, from other cuts, and so they end up actually $560 worse off, minus 2.3%. And again, I would say in 50 years of watching economic policy, I have never seen a package that was so regressive, that did so much to take money from the poor, give it to the rich, and take it away from the poor. This is unprecedented in our history. It is the most amazing piece of social legislation in the wrong direction that we have ever seen.
Well, you actually have massive tax cuts for billionaires, massive tax cuts for multinational corporations, the slashing of health care for people in rural America, in red state America, also in blue state America, those who are truly disadvantaged. And Steve, it goes even beyond that. You have the National Institute of Health being slashed by 35–40%, according to some estimates. The National Cancer Institute being slashed by well over a third. You have science, research on science and other R&D funding that has kept America at the forefront of the technological boom, the scientific boom, the medical boom, medical research boom. It's kept us ahead of the rest of the world. Talk about how these areas are getting slashed, whether you're talking about research for cancer, research for Alzheimer's, research for Parkinson's, research for breast cancer, for every other form of cancer and other treatments. Talk about how, for some reason, Republicans decided to give billionaires tax cuts, decided to give multinational corporations tax cuts, and decided to gut research to make people healthy, to help cure people of cancer, to give people with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and their family hope.
You're absolutely right, Joe. This is the most extraordinarily anti-science administration, also certainly in modern history. You could describe what you just went through as eating our seed corn. We're getting rid of all the stuff that are the important building blocks for our future. There's things like basic research, NIH, which you mentioned, and so forth, are things that only the government can do. The private sector is not going to do this. And if we stop doing it, it is really going to have a major impact on our future livelihood. But let's turn back to the deficit thing that you mentioned, Joe, because there the news is also so terrible. This black line is our baseline. This is what would happen to the deficit even if we did nothing. And you can see it continues to climb. It's just under $2 trillion at the moment. It would go down a little, but then it would just relentlessly climb. If you add in the bill as it is written, you can see it climbs more. If you add in, assuming everything gets made permanent, which I think is a reasonably safe assumption given how Congress operates, you could see the deficit would go from under $2 trillion to over $3.2 trillion per year. So this is every single year, this is what would happen. And so you add all the stuff up, and you're talking about the extra $3 trillion over there that I showed you, but also just the existing deficit would add more than another probably around $25 trillion to our existing national debt of $37 trillion. Take it to levels, not just in dollars, but as it relates to the size of our economy that we've never seen before. Now, you might say, oh, this would be kind of okay if we got some economic benefit out of it, but that does not seem likely to happen. These are all five of these are projections done by independent research institutes of what would happen to economic growth under this bill. One of them shows a little bit of growth. This is a slightly right-leaning organization. All the rest of them essentially show very little. One even shows some loss of economic growth at the beginning and the end of this period. So essentially, you've got 5 independent organizations saying no impact on growth. What does the White House say? The White House says you're going to have a massive positive impact on economic growth. This is the addition to growth you get from the bill.
Wow.
This would
Big
take
difference.
economic growth. If this actually happened, it would be our fastest level of economic growth since 1984. So I'm betting these people are going to be right. And not only are the people at the bottom of the ladder, as we saw, not going to get much, the country as a whole is not going to get much in terms of economic growth.
Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Rattner.